Welcome to the deep dive. Today, the sources we're looking at, they really present this striking contradiction. On one hand, you have successful, strength-based diplomacy overseas, stuff achieved through, let's say, unconventional means. But then that's contrasted really sharply with domestic policies, the research argues are creating a critical security vulnerability right here at home. Okay, so let's unpack this. The material you shared, it details a pretty pivotal moment in global affairs, right? A Middle East ceasefire, then a peace initiative. Stuff many experts thought was, frankly, impossible.
Impossible, yeah. That was the common refrain.
And it was achieved, the sources say, after the strategic use of military and political power. The immediate news hook, of course, is the Gaza ceasefire. That was October 2025. And then President Trump's push for stability in Ukraine, even while Kyiv is asking for things like long-range missiles, escalation tools. But here's where it gets really interesting as you read through this decisive action abroad. It clashes hard with this silent threat the research details. The argument is that the U.S. has basically ceded control of essential future energy components.
Things like advanced batteries, core solar parts.
Exactly. Handed it directly to China. And this creates, well, a massive self-imposed national security risk. So our mission today is to analyze that contradiction. How can the U.S. project all this strength globally, while at the same time deepening this huge dependency on Beijing for our future energy grid?
It's fascinating. And what really connects these two very different points on the map is the immediate hit to your wallet. Geopolitical volatility. It instantly drives up prices. We're seeing it right now. I mean, tensions caused Brent crude oil prices to jump 20% before the recent Middle East strikes even happened.
Wow.
And international shipping rates up 30% back in June because of the Red Sea conflict. That gets passed right on to you, the consumer. So this deep dive, it really connects that high-stakes global diplomacy with the energy decisions happening, right here.
Okay, let's start with that story of foreign strength then. The sources, they describe the Gaza ceasefire and the peace plan that followed as an extraordinary achievement, and are specific about why. It was achieved by rejecting the, quote, conventional wisdom that had failed for, 80 years?
80 years, yeah, a long time.
And the core lesson they pull out is facts on the ground dictate the diplomacy, not the other way around.
Exactly. The sources really hammer this point. The strategy involved using power, political, diplomatic, and military, to create leverage. And they give specific examples like June 2025, Israel bombs Iranian nuclear sites. Then days later, the U.S. follows up with these devastating strikes. Operation Midnight Hammer, they called it, on Iran's biggest nuclear facilities. This raw military power, they argue, was absolutely critical. It forced a new reality for negotiations.
And that military pressure, it wasn't just aimed at Iran, right? It was directly on Hamas, too.
Yeah.
The assault on Gaza City. The sources say that was Hamas's last real stronghold. And it taught them a blunt lesson. Holding hostages wasn't going to stop the operation.
That's right. The diplomatic win only came after that force was applied.
It's that classic idea. Strength creates the opening for peace.
Right. And President Trump delivered a clear ultimatum to Hamas. A last warning, the sources call it, accept the peace terms or face, quote, full backing for Israel to just destroy them completely.
But the diplomatic leverage part, how that shifted, that's where it gets really interesting.
It really is. The sources pinpoint a specific moment. An Israeli strike hit Hamas leaders hiding out in Doha, and that apparently scared the Qataris into begging for protection from Trump.
Thanking for protection.
Yeah. And once Trump offered that security blanket, the Qataris immediately started leaning hard on Hamas. Accept the deal. Release all living hostages on day one.
And that pushed Turkey, too.
Exactly. Turkey then piled on, pushing Hamas for the same thing. It was a cascade triggered by that initial power play.
That's a real textbook case of leveraging a crisis to gain control, isn't it?
It is. And the analysis strongly suggests that this shows diplomatic failure often comes from, just an unwillingness to use decisive power when needed.
Okay, so let's pivot now. Let's look at the financial side, the fallout from these conflicts. Specifically, that constant threat to the global energy supply that kind of underpins all these talks. Because even with a ceasefire, that market volatility, it's still dangerous.
Oh, absolutely. The risk hasn't gone away, and the scale of it is still immense. The number that should really make you sit up is about the Strait of Hormuz.
All right, Iran threatened to close it.
They did, in retaliation for those U.S. strikes. And that narrow channel, it handles nearly 25% of all global oil traffic.
A quarter of the world's oil goes through there.
Yep. So if that gets shut down, even briefly, global oil prices could spike another, 20 to 30% overnight.
Wow.
overnight.
Think about what that does.
Right.
It's not just gas prices, it's everything. Every product shipped,
Yeah.
every manufactured good, suddenly way more expensive.
And it wasn't just crude oil feeling the heat, right?
Yeah.
LNG prices also spiked.
They did. The conflict caused about a 10% spike in global liquefied natural gas prices.
Yeah.
That happened when Israel and Iran paused production in some key fields. So geopolitical instability translates instantly. Higher costs, more uncertainty right here.
Okay, let's shift to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The sources paint a picture of that becoming a really brutal energy war, especially heading into winter.
It really has. The consequences are direct attacks on infrastructure. You've got Russian strikes that have reportedly destroyed about 60% of Ukraine's gas production capacity. 60%.
Is crippled. And in retaliation, Ukrainian drones have apparently disabled somewhere between 20% and 38% of Russia's oil refining capacity.
So hitting each other where it hurts the energy grid.
Exactly, causing fuel shortages inside Russia, too, in several regions.
Okay.
This war is absolutely being fought through energy infrastructure.
And the diplomacy around Ukraine is still incredibly tense. President Trump is reportedly trying to broker peace, but President Zelensky is pushing hard for those long-range Tomahawk missiles.
Yeah, the ones with the massive 2,400-kilometer range.
Which means they could potentially hit targets deep inside Russia. That seems like the major flashpoint.
That's right, and Russia's warned that giving Kyiv those specific missiles would be a, quote, qualitatively new stage of escalation. So it's this really delicate balancing act, trying to negotiate peace, trying to avoid a wider war, all while the conflict itself is actively destroying the energy systems needed to survive.
Okay, so that chaos, that immediate energy vulnerability overseas, it makes this next point feel even more urgent. While the U.S. is projecting military strengths abroad, the question the sources raise is, are we simultaneously undermining our own stability here at home? Let's dive into that core contradiction the research highlights, the risks in what the analysis calls the self-imposed U.S. energy transition.
Yeah, the central claim in the research is pretty stark. It argues that these costly green policies will, quote, handcuff America to China's critical minerals and its green energy industries. China's framed here not just as a competitor, but as a clear economic and cyber adversary. And the argument is that U.S. policy is basically forcing us into relying on them for, well, core future infrastructure.
Let's talk about the numbers, the actual data showing that dependence. Because it's kind of eye-opening how much control China's locked down.
It really is. They dominate almost every critical component you need. China controls 85% of global battery production,
95%.
80% of solar component production, and 85% of rare earth processing.
Okay, wait. Rare earth processing. Why is that specific part so dominated by China? I mean, the minerals exist elsewhere, right?
That's a great question. So rare earth elements, they're vital for the high-tech magnets. Think electric vehicles, wind turbines, lots of tech. And while the raw minerals are found in other countries, the actual processing, it's complex, it's incredibly messy environmentally, and it's highly regulated. China basically cornered that market over decades. Massive state subsidies, what the sources call predatory pricing, to undercut everyone else.
So they control the refining bottleneck.
Exactly. And if this projected energy transition really happens, the world's going to need like a 3 to 7 times increase in rare earth production by 2040. And under current conditions, the vast majority of that will still be processed in and controlled by Beijing.
And this reliance, it's not just about economics or supply chains, is it? It brings in serious, immediate national security risks. The sources really flag the cyber risk, integrating all this Chinese-made hardware into our grid.
Absolutely. It's a huge intelligence threat. Chinese hacking groups, like Volt Typhoon, they're known for targeting utilities, communication systems, critical infrastructure globally. They've already been found inside U.S. critical infrastructure, including energy systems. So that raises the very real risk of disruption or even sabotage if geopolitical tensions flare up.
And there was even a real-world example of how seriously this is taken, that incident at Camp Lejeune.
Right, that's a powerful illustration. Batteries made by CATL, a huge Chinese company, were installed near the Marine Corps Base Camp Lejeune in North Carolina, but they were removed later. Why? Concerns that passive sensor technology hidden inside the battery units could send energy usage data back to China.
Wow. Sending operational data about energy use on a major Marine base?
Yeah.
Back to Beijing.
Precisely. It shows how quickly economic dependence can become a strategic intelligence vulnerability. I mean, potentially revealing things about the base's energy needs, its operational tempo, maybe even during exercises or a crisis.
So what does this mean for policy here at home? It seems like the U.S. is actively blocking its own production of the exact materials needed for this transition. The sources mentioned blocking essential copper and nickel mining projects, like the Ambler Road copper mine in Alaska, the Twin Metals mine in Minnesota, blocked because of what the analysis calls onerous environmental rules.
And that is the ultimate policy disconnect the research points to. The government is mandating a future that requires a massive increase in these specific minerals. Yet at the same time, it's imposing regulations that stop us from mining and processing those minerals domestically, which forces the U.S. to rely on the very adversary, China, that we're trying to project strength against overseas. The sources basically argue how these domestic constraints are self-inflicted wounds. They undermine any long-term security gains we make through diplomacy.
So if we tie this all together, the big picture shows these two completely contradictory things happening at once. On one side, you have decisive, strength-based action dealing with adversaries like Iran and Hamas, achieving real diplomatic wins.
Oil wins, yeah.
Yeah.
Based on leverage.
But on the other hand, you have this strategic weakness being created by our own internal policy choices that, the sources argue, willingly hand over control of our future energy grid to a known economic and cyber adversary in Beijing.
The takeaway for you listening is pretty clear from these sources. Instability hits fast, whether it's high oil prices from a conflict far away or this longer-term creeping dependence on Chinese tech for our own infrastructure.
So you now have the key facts on the ground, as presented in the research, both abroad and right here at home. We've seen the argument that military and political power paved the way for that Middle East peace, the idea that strength dictates the diplomatic result. But this raises a really important question for you to think about. If American strength is fundamentally measured by independence, by self-reliance, can any diplomatic victory overseas truly matter in the long run if we allow ourselves to become strategically dependent on Beijing just to keep the lights on, to keep our own infrastructure running? Something to consider. Where does true national security really begin?